Good morning. My name is Amisha Patel, and I'm Executive Director of Grassroots Collaborative. We are here today because funding for our neighborhoods is down, but the shootings are up. We know that our communities are losing resources because money that should be going to successful anti-violence programs is instead being shipped off to Wall Street banks like Chase, which is why we're here today. This week, the papers reported the death of Jonathan Mills, another young person whose life was cut too short. And the reality is that almost every single day, people's lives are cut too short in the city of Chicago. This recent surge of violence is even more tragic because we have proven programs that we know that can help prevent the violence, that can help prevent those shootings. Programs like Teen Reach, Ceasefire, Summer Jobs for Youth, and so many more. But Governor Rauner is choosing to not fund them. Instead, he is choosing to put resources, instead of putting resources in the communities who so desperately need them, he instead is shipping our money, taxpayer dollars, to Wall Street banks like JP Morgan Chase. The way that he's doing this is through these deals called toxic interest rate swaps. Now, everyone knows the role that the banks have played in causing the housing crisis. But we don't know as much the role that the banks are playing in destroying our economy and causing our budget crisis here in Illinois. And that's why we're here today. Because in November, it is possible that the Governor Rauner will pay out Wall Street banks $870 million on these toxic deals. This is almost $1 billion in the time of huge crisis facing our communities and our neighborhoods and our families. And the fact that the governor may choose to give this money to folks like JP Morgan Chase instead of to our communities and neighborhoods to help prevent the violence is unspeakable. So we're here today to have a set of really powerful speakers to talk about what's happening in the neighborhoods, talk about what's been happening in terms of where the money's going and where it's not going, and why we so desperately need the governor to choose the right thing, and that is to choose our families. I want to first bring up Karina Martinez, who's a leader with Brighton Park Neighborhood Council and a senior at Curie High School. Karina.
Good morning. My name is Karina Martinez, and I'm a rising senior at Curie High School and a community leader with Brighton Park Neighborhood Council. I'm here today because I care about my community. I'm tired of seeing senseless violence taking over. Even in the face of so much violence, we're still seeing unprecedented cuts in violence prevention and school programs throughout the city and states. These programs play a big part in addressing the violence we see in our neighborhoods. Programs like Ceasefire, to after-school programs like Teen Reach, to summer jobs, they give students an outlet to express themselves rather than spend time on the streets. Governor Rauner has not done his job in prioritizing the problems in our communities. Instead, he has participated in the same kind of racist disinvestments that our communities have been suffering for years. Instead of being involved in summer jobs, summer school programs, and receiving social services, young people have nowhere to go and nothing to do. This is not addressing the problem, this is perpetuating it. Our schools barely received any assistance from the governor at last minute. We know he doesn't value teachers, but does that mean he also does not value school counselors, social workers, and restorative justice practitioners? Those are the front lines of social issues in our school. It is not the warm weather that brings the violence. It is the continual disinvestment of the students and the youth.
That's right.
Where does the money that is being taken away from our communities go to? To big banks like JP Morgan Chase. While Rauner eliminated Ceasefire and cut vital services in my community in the state of Illinois, the state of Illinois paid Chase Bank $7.8 million on interest rate ideals. And if Governor Rauner does not act soon, $870 million more will be given to these same banks in November. How many of our services and schools will be cut to pay for that? That is money that could be used to save lives in Chicago. We need that money. Banks do not. I'm here to call on Governor Rauner to address the summer violence. He may not be impacted by it, and he may not see it, but people in Illinois do. Every day, we invite him to meet with students like me and on how we can rebuild and reinvest in our communities. And we call on him on stop giving our money to Wall Street banks and instead fully fund anti-violence programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Next, we have Brenda McMillan, an Auburn Gresham resident. An Auburn Gresham resident whose grandson was killed in 2013. Ms. McMillan.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As she stated,
Hold on for 1 second.
Okay. My name is Brenda McMillan, and I am a family child care provider, and I've lived in the Auburn Gresham community for the past 49 years. 3 years ago, my grandson was murdered. My grandson's name was Deontay Maxwell. He was a great kid. He was a kid that was doing everything a kid his age should be doing. He was going to college. He got good grades in school. He had honors classes. He played on the football team. He came home from college and was murdered. There was a birthday party. An altercation broke out. These gentlemen were young guys, were asked to leave. They didn't want to go, so that's when the altercation broke out. It was verbal, it became physical, and then shots were fired. At the end of all the chaos, my grandson was dead. Now, in my heart, I believe, had those children had something to do in the community, maybe my grandson would still be here. There were social programs when I grew up. I learned how to sew, although I don't sew now. As a child, I learned how to sew, and I did wood shop in the park in my community that I could walk to. As a family child care provider, I take my children to the park, or should I say I used to take my children to the park. For 21 years, Monday through Friday, we walked to the park. I stopped 3 years ago after there was a shooting during the daylight at the park that we attend, and then Deontay was murdered a week later. So I felt like that was over, that was it. So now we're confined to a backyard of my home, so we don't get to walk out like we used to. My neighborhood and other neighborhoods desperately need anti-violence programs and summer jobs for teens.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
In just a few days, our governor will have a choice to make. Will he pay out $900 million to JP Morgan Chase and other banks, or will he fund those programs that we desperately need? If Governor Browner has his way, he'll voluntarily pay those debts instead of funding for the community. How dare you, Governor, put the interests of big banks in front of our children and our communities. I know that we can do better than what we're doing now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McMillan. I want to bring up another powerhouse, and that's Ms. Evelyn Johnson, a Woodlawn resident whose grandson was also killed. And she's going to talk about what's happening in the neighborhoods. Ms. Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Governor, I happen to be a grandparent of 3 grandsons that were murdered in the city of Chicago in 27 months. I have 45 years experience of doing violence prevention, of training people to do street corner grief counseling and domestic violence counseling. And the one thing that young people come back with about why they're on street corners, about why they pick up guns, there is nothing for me to do. Last year I could get a job with you, this year I can't. Young mothers saying I can't pay a babysitter to watch my children if I go to school. But Governor, you need to understand this, especially about the child care. when you stop the child care, you affect not only their children, but you affect that entire household. Because if they're on low-income housing that first 3 days that they miss going to a program, they are in violation of their Section 8 contract. So now you're going to have children that can't go to daycare, mothers that can't go to work or school, and then they become homeless. You know, you stop the homeless prevention program.
Right.
So when they dial 311, where do they get the help from?
Come on now, say that.
Okay? And this is statewide. HUD don't change its guidelines city to city. That's nationwide. If you walk down the street and walk up to a young man, can I borrow your hand for a minute?
Yes.
If you walk up to a young man and say to him, thank you for not killing your people,
Yes, come on.
then they want to know, why shouldn't they? Because they taking up a spot I could have. They taking up a job I could have.
Come on now.
So when you go to Chase, but see, my thing is they need to go deeper than you. The people that got accounts at Chase and Bank America, if they accept this money, you need to find you a bank that is working in your interest, and community reinvestment dollars are coming back into the community to do capacity buildings with the residents of the place you decide to park your ass.
That's right.
Thank you.
I would follow Ms. Johnson anywhere. Anywhere you take me.
My name in the street is Mama Solutions.
All right, Mama Solutions.
About
That's right.
problems.
That's right.
I talk to them about solving their problems.
Thank you. So next I want to bring up Joel Munoz, a second grade teacher with Hedges Elementary and a member of the Chicago Teachers Union.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Joel Munoz, and I am a second grade teacher at Hedges Elementary in the back of the yards neighborhood. I'm here to represent my students.
Walk up to the mic. Okay.
I'm here to represent my students and their families, and to speak for other educators who, like me, experience firsthand how the rising violence affects their classrooms and the communities where we teach. As many of my colleagues have, I went to CPS from preschool through high school. I grew up in a part of Brighton Park where the safest public space after school was my school. I remember in the second grade joining my friends in the after-school checkers chess club. I can still feel the thrill when my fifth grade teacher inspired me to join the science program after school. In 7th and 8th grade, I couldn't wait for the bell to ring, not so that I could go hang out with my friends in the corner, but to go to soccer practice. The rise in violence and the cuts to after-school programs in back of the yards has directly impacted my students and their families. My students have less opportunities now for extracurriculars than in the past, now that they are needed the most. My students ask me for after-school programs, for sports, for technology, for art, but there's no money for that. Instead, they go home and hear gunshots. They watch the news with their families about how another person was shot only a few blocks away from where they live. They come back traumatized. They can't concentrate for lessons after incidents like this. In fact, they don't even have to go home to hear gunshots. Last school year alone, I can count 3 times where we were in school and there were shots fired a block away. I should be able to refer these students to a social worker, but guess what? There's not enough money for that either. As a teacher who grew up with these experiences, I know how staying involved in after-school programs that are interesting to students allows them to explore their talents in a positive way. My students now should have the same opportunities afforded to them, but that is at risk. It is up to us to demand that Governor Rauner make the right choice. Governor Rauner, that $1 billion has been earned by our sweat and our blood in our communities. It belongs to us, not to Chase Bank, not to make the millionaires richer. Make the right decision and use it to fully fund the programs our students and communities deserve.
Thank you, Joel.
Yeah, Joe.
So I want to point out before I bring up the next speaker, these two piles of money. You can see they're really different. On my right is the amount that Illinois has paid Wall Street banks last year alone, and that was $92 million. On my left is the amount that Illinois paid to anti-violence programs last year, and that is $2.4 million. Is that right? No! Is that right? No! Are we going to fight to make sure that not a single dollar more goes to this pile, and instead that this money goes here? So I want to bring up another speaker, and that's Erika Rangel, a leader with Enlace Chicago right here in Little Village. Erika.
Good morning. My name is Erika Rangel. I have grown up in this neighborhood, and I get the privilege to be able to work in this neighborhood every day. Little Village is not without its challenges. I get to experience its blessings, but we understand the needs of the neighborhood, and we also know why outside pressures contribute to the challenges of the neighborhood. Right now, the state of Illinois is cutting life-saving programs like Ceasefire, like Teen Reach, like Youth Jobs. This stopgap budget was not enough to fund a fully funded state, fully funded communities, and a fully funded city. Right. The money that's being used to pay out these toxic swaps isn't being pulled out of thin air. We know where it comes from. It's coming out of our communities, it's coming out of our programs, and it's coming out of our taxpayer dollars. Right. We need Ronner to understand the deadly consequences of these swap deals. Last weekend alone in Chicago, there were 47 shootings. In the entire year last year, there were 490 killings. 490 killed last year. This year alone, and we're barely into August, we're still in July, we're already at 366 shootings, 366 murders. You cannot tell me that there isn't a rise in violence, and you cannot tell me that the lack of a state budget isn't contributing to the rise in violence. Right. We see that firsthand every day, and we know that that is the truth. Why are these contracts being honored versus contracts with communities like ours, which in the case of Ceasefire are serving communities of predominantly communities of color? What that says to us is that areas that are in most need, communities of color, are not as important as these rich bankers. Yeah, that's right. It sends a clear message to us. We understand where these hotspots are, and we know clearly how solutions can be brought to these hotspots, where money could be poured into these neighborhoods to prevent shootings. Yes. But instead, we see it being drained and washed away, put into the money in the hands of these bankers. So we need to question the legality of these bank contracts. Why are their contracts more legal than contracts with communities? That's right. We're asking Ronner not to pay out on these tax deals, not to terminate them by paying them out in this way. We're asking him to stand with us. If he chooses to make this bold choice and not pay out the bankers, we will stand with him. He should not pay a single more of our taxpayer dollars to the bankers. One less dollar into funding our schools that goes into these banks has detrimental effects. 47 shootings this weekend. The toxic deals were risky. We see that now. And they're proving to have put us all at risk, lives at risk, and this is not a game for us. When the government decides that it is more important to make payments to big banks who are in no danger of going out of business and who have cheated our state through these bad deals than it is to put money towards life-saving programs, then they are clearly demonstrating where their morals lie. And that choice is very visible to us, and we see you clearly. That's right. Thank you.
So we have our final speaker of the day, and that is Reverend Marvin Hunter from Grace Memorial Baptist Church. Reverend.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Marvin Hunter, M-A-R-V-I-N-H-U-N-T-E-R. I'm the pastor of the Grace Memorial Baptist Church. I'm also the founder and organizer of Churches United, and I want to thank these pastors that have come out to stand with us today. And I want to thank all of the organizations that are out here and representing today for the purpose of speaking for the people of our individual communities that have come together unified with one voice to say to the governor, no more. No more do you continue to give us the lies that you have given us from the day that you've taken office. Your campaign rhetoric said that you were going to be the jobs governor, but you haven't created one job. Now, if you've created them, there's nobody in my community that are working in them. I am from the community of Lawndale. And the reality of it is, the way to reduce violence is not by putting $92 million into Wall Street or into banks. The way to reduce crime is to create jobs, contracts, and opportunities for the indigenous people of these communities. Communities like North Lawndale, communities like Roseland, communities like Austin. We must put the money where it will count and work the most. Listen, you're the governor of the state of Illinois, but we are American people. And you have a responsibility to make America great. And you can't make America great if you continue to have us live under these oppressive conditions where you continue to have these oligarch actions that you take. Because it seems to me that the only thing that is really important to you is that you shore up the pockets of your billionaire friends as opposed to the people that are the taxpayers. We the people need your help to put the money where it goes, back into anti-violence programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. I just want to thank all of the speakers today for the tremendous courage that you have and you have every day to fight the fights you're fighting in your neighborhoods. And I hope that our governor also will have some courage and do the right thing next week and renew these letters of credit so that the money can stay in our neighborhoods and our communities and not go into the hands of Wall Street banks. So I want to open up for any questions. All right, so we got a chant to close us out.
Chase, you can't hide, we can see your greedy side.
Chase, you can't hide, we can see your greedy side.
Chase, you can't hide,
we can see your greedy side.
Chase, you can't
hide, we can see your greedy side.
Chase, you can't hide,
We can see your greedy side.
Chase, you can't hide.
We can see your greedy side.
Banks got bailed out.
We got sold out.
Banks got bailed out.
We got sold out.
Banks got bailed out.
We got sold out.
Banks got bailed out.
We got sold